The radio crackled at 2:47 a.m., and I heard my own voice screaming for help. I was alone in the communications room of the Northern Passage, a research vessel cutting through the ice fields of the Bering Strait. The sound that came through the speakers made my blood turn cold. It was my voice, unmistakably mine, but twisted with a terror I had never felt before. The transmission lasted exactly 11 seconds before dissolving into static. I sat frozen in my chair, my hand hovering over the recording equipment, trying to convince myself that exhaustion was playing tricks on my mind. My name is Rook. I am 29 years old and I have been working as a communications technician for the United States Polar Research Division for 4 years. I have heard strange things over these radio waves before. Phantom signals, echoes from old Soviet stations, even the occasional prank from bored sailors on other vessels. But I had never heard anything like this. I had never heard myself. Before I go any further, I need you to understand something. What happened on the Northern Passage changed everything I thought I knew about reality. If you have ever experienced something you could not explain, something that made you question your own sanity, then maybe you will understand what I am about to tell you. And if this story reaches you, if it makes you think twice about the impossible, then please leave a comment below. Tell me I am not alone in this. Tell me you believe me. The Northern Passage had left Dutch Harbor, Alaska, 3 weeks earlier. Our mission was routine: collect ice core samples, monitor marine life patterns, and maintain the network of automated weather stations scattered across the Arctic. Our crew consisted of 12 people. Captain Wendell, a grizzled veteran with 30 years of polar experience. Dr. Elaine Foster, our lead scientist. 6 researchers, 2 engineers. And me, responsible for all communications between our ship and the outside world. The isolation out here was absolute. During our journey, we would sometimes go days without seeing another vessel. The ice stretched in every direction, a white wasteland broken only by the dark water of our wake. At night, the aurora borealis painted the sky in shimmering curtains of green and purple. It was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. I rewound the recording and played it again. The voice came through clearly this time, cutting through the static like a knife. "This is Rook, communications officer of the Northern Passage. We are at coordinates." The voice dissolved into interference, then returned. "Everyone is dead. Do not trust. Do not trust." The transmission ended abruptly. I checked the timestamp. The call had come from a frequency we used for emergency broadcasts, but the signal origin made no sense. According to the equipment, the distress call had originated from our exact position. Not near us, not from another ship nearby. From precisely where we were at the exact same coordinates at 2:47 a.m. I am a man of science and logic. I have a degree in telecommunications engineering from the University of Washington. I do not believe in ghosts or supernatural phenomena. But as I sat in that communications room, surrounded by blinking lights and humming equipment, I could not find a rational explanation for what I had just heard. My hands were shaking as I reached for the internal communication system to alert Captain Wendell. Before I could press the button, the radio crackled again. This time it was a different voice, Dr. Foster. "Rook, this is Dr. Foster. If you are receiving this, lock yourself in the communications room. Do not open the door for anyone. They are not who they appear to be." The transmission cut off. I stared at the radio equipment, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Dr. Foster was asleep in her cabin 3 decks below. I had seen her go to bed at 10:00 p.m. just like she did every night. She followed a strict routine. Early to bed, early to rise. She would not be awake now, and she certainly would not be broadcasting emergency messages. I stood up from my chair and walked to the small window that looked out over the deck. Everything appeared normal. The ship cut steadily through the ice, its powerful engines thrumming beneath my feet. The deck lights illuminated the frost-covered railings and equipment. Nothing moved out there except the endless swirl of snow carried by the Arctic wind. I turned back to the radio and noticed something I had missed before. The equipment showed that both transmissions had been recorded and stored in the system's memory. But when I checked the log, there was no record of any incoming signals. The memory banks showed nothing. No timestamps, no frequency data, no saved audio files. It was as if the transmissions had never happened. Except I had heard them. I had heard my own voice, and I had heard Dr. Foster's warning. I sat back down and tried to think clearly. There had to be a logical explanation. Perhaps someone was playing a prank, using sophisticated equipment to mimic our voices and frequencies. Perhaps the cold was affecting the electronics, creating false signals. Perhaps I was more exhausted than I realized, and my mind was creating auditory hallucinations. But even as I considered these possibilities, I knew they did not fit. The voices had been too clear, too specific, and the fear in my own voice when I heard it, that raw terror, was not something that could be easily faked or imagined. I decided to check on Dr. Foster. If she was asleep in her cabin, then I would know the transmission was false. If she was awake and acting strangely, then I would have a different problem to deal with. Either way, I needed to know. I left the communications room and locked the door behind me. The corridors of the northern passage were narrow and painted a sterile white. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in a harsh, clinical glow. My footsteps echoed on the metal floor as I made my way toward the crew quarters. The ship was quiet at this hour. Most of the crew were asleep. The engineers on night watch would be down in the engine room, and whoever had the bridge watch would be up in the pilot house. I should have been the only person moving through these corridors. But as I turned a corner, I saw someone standing at the far end of the hallway. It was me. I stopped walking. The figure at the end of the corridor was wearing the same thermal jumpsuit I was wearing, same build, same height, same short dark hair. The figure was standing perfectly still, facing me about 50 feet away. I felt my throat go dry. "Who are you?" I called out. The figure did not respond. It simply stood there watching me. Then slowly it raised one hand and pointed at me. The gesture was deliberate, accusatory, as if it was identifying me as something wrong, something that should not be here. I blinked, and the figure was gone. The corridor was empty. I stood there, breathing hard, trying to process what I had just seen. A hallucination. It had to be a hallucination. The stress, the isolation, the strange radio transmissions, they were all combining to make me see things that were not there. I forced myself to keep walking. Dr. Foster's cabin was on deck 3, and I needed to reach it. I needed to prove to myself that she was asleep, that everything was normal, that my mind was simply playing tricks. When I reached her door, I hesitated. What would I say if she answered? How would I explain why I was knocking on her door at 3:00 a.m.? But I had come this far and I needed to know. I knocked quietly, no response. I knocked again a little louder, still nothing. "Dr. Foster," I called softly. "It is Rook. I need to speak with you." Silence. I tried the door handle and found it unlocked. This was unusual. Captain Wendell had strict rules about security. All cabin doors were to be locked when occupied. I pushed the door open slowly. The cabin was empty. The bed was made untouched. Dr. Foster's personal belongings were arranged neatly on the small desk, her laptop, her notebooks, her reading glasses, but she was not there. I checked the small bathroom attached to the cabin. Also empty. Dr. Foster was somewhere else on the ship, awake and moving around in the middle of the night. I left the cabin and headed toward the laboratory section. Perhaps she had been unable to sleep and had gone to work on her research. It would not be unusual. Dr. Foster was dedicated to her work, often spending long hours analyzing ice samples and marine data. The laboratory was located on deck 2, a large room filled with scientific equipment, specimen freezers, and computer workstations. When I entered, I found Dr. Foster standing at one of the workstations, her back to me, staring at a computer screen. "Dr. Foster," I said. She did not turn around. She remained perfectly still, her eyes fixed on the screen. I walked closer and saw what she was looking at. The screen displayed a video feed from the ship's external cameras, but the image was wrong. The footage showed the Northern Passage from an external perspective, as if being filmed from another vessel or perhaps a drone. But we had no drones deployed, and there were no other ships within hundreds of miles. In the video, I could see our ship moving through the ice. But there was something else. Another ship, identical to the Northern Passage, moving parallel to us about 100 yards away. It was like looking at a mirror image, except the second ship appeared darker, its lights dimmer, its hull marked with long scratches and dents that our ship did not have. "Dr. Foster, where is this footage coming from?" I asked. She finally turned to look at me. Her face was pale, her eyes wide. "Rook," she said quietly, "when did you come aboard?" The question caught me off guard. "What do you mean? I have been on the ship for 3 weeks. You know that." She shook her head slowly. "No, the Rook I knew. He disappeared 2 days ago. We searched the entire ship. We thought he had fallen overboard. Captain Wendell held a memorial service yesterday evening." She took a step back from me. "So I will ask you again. When did you come aboard?" I felt the room spin around me. "Dr. Foster, I do not understand what you are talking about. I have been here the entire time. I was just in the communications room. I picked up a distress call and I came to find you." Her hand moved to her pocket and I saw her grip something there. A knife, perhaps, or some other weapon. "The distress call," she said. "What did it say?" "It was my voice. And then I heard you, warning me not to trust anyone." Dr. Foster's expression changed. The fear in her eyes was replaced by something else. Recognition. "It has started again," she whispered. "What has started again?" I demanded. "Dr. Foster, please tell me what is happening." Before she could answer, the ship's emergency alarm began to blare. The sound was deafening, echoing through the metal corridors. Red warning lights flashed on the walls. Over the intercom, Captain Wendell's voice boomed through the ship. "All crew to emergency stations. This is not a drill. We have a collision alert. Repeat, we have a collision alert." Dr. Foster and I looked at each other, then rushed toward the nearest porthole. I pressed my face against the cold glass and looked out into the darkness. The second ship was there. Not on a video screen, not in my imagination. It was real, physical, moving through the ice directly toward us. It was the Northern Passage, or at least something that looked exactly like our vessel. Every detail was identical. The hull configuration, the deck layout, the position of the masts and communication arrays. But it was wrong. The ship looked ancient, weathered, as if it had been lost in the ice for decades. Rust streaked its hull. Ice coated its superstructure. And worst of all, I could see figures moving on its deck. Shadowy shapes that looked human but moved in strange, jerky motions. "This is impossible," I breathed. Dr. Foster grabbed my arm. "We need to get to the bridge. Captain Wendell needs to know what we are dealing with." We ran through the corridors as the alarm continued to wail. Other crew members were emerging from their cabins, confused and frightened. I saw Jenkins, one of the engineers, standing in a doorway in his underwear looking bewildered. I saw 2 of the researchers, pale and shaking, huddled together. When we reached the bridge, we found Captain Wendell and his first officer, Reynolds, staring at the radar screens in disbelief. "Captain," I said, breathless, "the other ship." "I see it, Rook," he cut me off. His voice was tight with tension. "I see it on radar, on visual, on every damn instrument we have, but it should not be there. We have had no contact, no warning, it just appeared." Reynolds pointed at one of the screens. "Sir, I am picking up radio transmissions from that vessel. They are on our emergency frequency." "Put it on speaker," Captain Wendell ordered. The radio crackled to life, and a voice filled the bridge. It was Captain Wendell's voice, exact in every detail but hollow somehow, as if coming from a great distance. Northern Passage, this is Northern Passage. We are requesting immediate assistance. Our crew is dead. Repeat, our entire crew is dead. Do not board us. Do not attempt rescue. You must turn back. You must turn back now before it is too late. The transmission ended. We all stood in silence, staring at each other. Captain Wendell's face had gone ashen. "That is my voice," he said quietly. "That is my goddamn voice." I looked out through the bridge windows at the approaching ship. It was less than 50 yards away now, close enough that I could make out more details. The figures on its deck were clearer. They wore the same thermal suits we wore. They had the same equipment, the same markings. But their movements were all wrong, twitchy and unnatural, like puppets being controlled by invisible strings. And then I saw something that made my blood freeze. Standing at the railing of the other ship, staring directly at us, was another version of me. This one looked different from the figure I had seen in the corridor. This one appeared injured, its face bloodied, its clothes torn. It raised one hand and waved slowly, a gesture that felt more like a warning than a greeting. Dr. Foster's grip on my arm tightened. "Rook, listen to me very carefully. What I am about to tell you will sound insane, but you need to believe me. This has happened before." I turned to look at her. "What do you mean?" She lowered her voice so only I could hear. 3 years ago, there was another polar research vessel, the Arctic Dawn. It disappeared without a trace in these same waters. The official report said it was crushed by ice, but the truth was classified. I saw the recovered data. In the days before they vanished, the crew reported seeing a duplicate ship. They received distress calls from themselves. And in the final transmission, the captain said something that was buried in the classified files. "What did he say?" I asked, though I was not sure I wanted to know. Dr. Foster's eyes were filled with a desperate intensity. He said time was folding in on itself. He said they were not dealing with another ship. They were dealing with themselves from a different moment, a different timeline. He said the Arctic had somehow created a loop and they were trapped in it. Captain Wendell had overheard. He turned to Dr. Foster, his expression a mixture of anger and fear. "Dr. Foster, if you knew about this, if you had any indication that we might encounter something like this, why the hell did you not report it?" "Because it was classified above my clearance level," she shot back. "Because the official story was that the Arctic Dawn was destroyed by natural causes. Because no one would have believed me." She gestured at the approaching ship. "Would you have believed me if I had come to you 3 weeks ago and told you we might encounter a ghost ship crewed by duplicates of ourselves?" Before anyone could respond, the ship lurched violently. I was thrown against the console, pain shooting through my shoulder. The lights flickered. The engines groaned. "We have made contact," Reynolds shouted. "The other vessel has collided with our starboard side." Through the windows, I could see the two ships grinding against each other, metal screaming against metal. The figures on the other ship's deck were now clearly visible, and what I saw made me wish I had never looked. They were us, all of us. I saw Captain Wendell, his face twisted in an expression of agony. I saw Dr. Foster, her white lab coat stained with something dark. I saw Jenkins, Reynolds, and every other member of our crew. But they were wrong, corrupted somehow, as if they were reflections in a broken mirror. And then I saw myself again. This version was different from the others. It looked exactly as I did now, standing in the same position on their bridge, staring back at me with the same expression of horror I knew was on my own face. For a moment we locked eyes across the gap between the ships, and in that moment I understood. Dr. Foster was right. This was not another ship. This was us from a time that had not happened yet, or perhaps from a time that had already happened. The Arctic had somehow torn a hole in the fabric of reality, and we were looking at our own future, our own past, our own death. The radio crackled again. This time it was my voice, but the transmission was breaking up, distorted. "Rook, if you can hear this, The loop has closed. We tried to warn you. We tried to break the cycle. But it always ends the same way. Everyone dies, everyone except. The transmission cut off before the sentence finished. Everyone except who? Everyone except what? The ship lurched again, more violently this time. Alarms were blaring from every direction. Captain Wendell was shouting orders, but I could barely hear him over the cacophony of sound. The other ship was pulling away now, drifting back into the darkness, taking its crew of twisted reflections with it. But I knew this was not over. This was just the beginning. The distress call I had received, the warning from Dr. Foster, the appearance of the duplicate ship, they were all pieces of something larger, something terrible that was unfolding around us. I looked at Dr. Foster and saw my own fear reflected in her eyes. "What do we do?" I asked. She shook her head. "I do not know. The Arctic Dawn crew never found a way out. The last transmission we received showed them." She hesitated. "It showed them killing each other. They could not tell who was real and who was not. The paranoia, the confusion, it destroyed them from within." The bridge had grown quiet. Captain Wendell was standing at the window, staring out into the darkness where the other ship had disappeared. "Get everyone to the common room," he said finally. "No one goes anywhere alone. We stick together until we figure out what we are dealing with." As the crew began to gather, I returned to my station and checked the communications equipment one more time. There, buried in the system logs, I found something that had not been there before. A text file with a single word repeated over and over, thousands of times, filling the entire document. The common room had never felt so small. All 12 members of the crew sat in a rough circle, the overhead lights casting harsh shadows across frightened faces. Captain Wendell stood at the head of the room, his weathered hands gripping the back of a chair so tightly his knuckles had turned white. Outside the reinforced windows, the Arctic night pressed against the glass like something alive, watching, waiting. I sat between Dr. Foster and Jenkins, the engineer who had looked so confused when the alarms first sounded. He kept glancing at me sideways, as if trying to determine whether I was really who I appeared to be. I could not blame him. After what we had all seen, trust had become a luxury none of us could afford. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," said Reynolds, the first officer. He was a tall man with a military bearing, someone who dealt in facts and procedures. "We encountered a ship that looked exactly like ours, crewed by people who looked exactly like us. And Dr. Foster is saying this is some kind of time loop or dimensional rift." Dr. Foster nodded slowly. "I know how it sounds, but the evidence is undeniable. The Arctic Dawn reported the same phenomena before they were lost. The duplicate ships, the distress calls from themselves, the breakdown of linear time." "The Arctic Dawn was crushed by ice," Captain Wendell said, but his voice lacked conviction. "That was the official report." "The official report was a cover-up," Dr. Foster replied firmly. "I have seen the classified files. The final transmissions were horrifying. The crew could not tell who was real anymore. They started attacking each other, convinced that duplicates had infiltrated their ship. By the end, there was no way to know which crew members were from the original timeline and which were from somewhere else." A young researcher named Timothy spoke up, his voice shaking. "So what are you saying? That some of us sitting here right now might not be real, that we might be duplicates?" "I am saying we need to be very careful," Dr. Foster answered. "We need to establish protocols. We need to figure out who was where and when, create a timeline of events that we can all verify." I cleared my throat. "I have something to add." All eyes turned to me. "Before we gathered here, I found something in the communications system, a text file that was not there before. Just one word repeated thousands of times: run." The room fell silent. Then Jenkins spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "Run from what? Run where? We are on a ship in the middle of the Arctic Ocean. There is nowhere to run." He was right, of course. We were trapped here, surrounded by thousands of miles of ice and freezing water. Whatever was happening, we would have to face it together or die trying. Captain Wendell pulled out a notepad and pen. "Dr. Foster, you said we need to establish a timeline. Let us start now. I want everyone to account for their whereabouts over the past 6 hours. We will cross-reference everyone's statements and look for inconsistencies." He pointed at me. "Rook, you start. You were the first to encounter the anomaly." I took a deep breath and recounted everything. The distress call at 2:47 a.m., the recording that had no record in the system logs, the figure I had seen in the corridor that looked exactly like me, finding Dr. Foster's cabin empty, the encounter in the laboratory, the collision with the duplicate ship. As I spoke, I watched the reactions of the crew. Most looked genuinely shocked and frightened, but a few I noticed showed something else. Recognition, perhaps, or was it guilt? I could not be sure. When I finished, Dr. Foster spoke. "I was in my cabin until approximately 2:30 a.m. I could not sleep. I kept having nightmares about the Arctic dawn, so I went to the laboratory to review some data. That is where Rook found me." "What kind of nightmares?" Timothy asked. Dr. Foster hesitated. "Dreams about drowning, dreams about being chased through the ship by something that wore my face, dreams about time running backward." She looked around the room. "I thought they were just anxiety dreams. Now I am not so sure. It is possible the temporal distortion was affecting us even before we were consciously aware of it." One by one, the crew members shared their accounts. Reynolds had been on bridge watch since midnight. The 2 engineers, Jenkins and a woman named Patricia, had been in the engine room. 4 researchers had been asleep in their cabins. The ship's doctor, an older man named Graves, had been in the medical bay, unable to sleep, reading a book. But there were gaps, small inconsistencies. Timothy claimed he had been in his cabin, but his roommate, another researcher named Davis, said Timothy's bed had been empty when he woke up at 2:00 a.m. Patricia, the engineer, said she had seen someone in a thermal suit walking past the engine room at 2:15 a.m., but she could not identify who it was because their back was turned. And then there was Graves, the doctor. When it was his turn to speak, he stood up slowly, his face pale. "I need to tell you all something," he said. "Something I did not want to believe, but after hearing Rook's story, I cannot keep it to myself anymore." Everyone leaned forward, waiting. At 3:00 a.m., I was in the medical bay when someone knocked on the door. I opened it and found Captain Wendell standing there. He looked ill, disoriented. He asked me for something to help him sleep. I gave him a mild sedative and sent him back to his cabin. Graves turned to look at Captain Wendell. "But that is impossible, sir, because according to your account, you were on the bridge at 3:00 a.m. dealing with the collision alert." The room erupted in confused voices. Captain Wendell's face had gone pale. "Dr. Graves, I was never in the medical bay tonight. I have not left the bridge since midnight except to come here." "Then who did I give the sedative to?" Graves asked, his voice rising with panic. "It was you, Captain, I am certain of it. Same voice, same face, same uniform. It was you." I felt a chill run down my spine. The duplicate ship had not just appeared alongside us. Somehow, members of its crew had already been aboard our vessel, moving among us, indistinguishable from the real crew members. Dr. Foster stood up abruptly. "We need to search the ship, right now. If there are duplicates aboard, we need to find them and contain them before this situation deteriorates further." "Contain them how?" Reynolds asked. "And how do we know who is real and who is not? If they look and sound exactly like us, what possible test could we use?" It was a good question, one I had been thinking about since I saw my own reflection standing at the end of the corridor. In the classic stories about doppelgangers and duplicates, there was always some way to tell them apart. A missing shadow, a lack of reflection in mirrors, some subtle imperfection that marked them as false. But what if there was no difference? What if the duplicates were perfect copies, identical down to the molecular level? How could we possibly tell who belonged to this timeline and who had come from somewhere else? Memories, I said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at me. We use specific memories, personal details that only the real person would know, things that happened before we entered this area of the Arctic. Dr. Foster nodded. That could work, but it would have to be information that is not in any personnel file or database, private memories that have not been shared with others. Captain Wendell considered this. All right, we will do it in pairs. Each person will ask their partner a series of personal questions. If anyone cannot answer correctly, we isolate them immediately. And if they can answer correctly, Patricia asked, what if the duplicates have all our memories? No one had an answer for that. We split into pairs and began the interrogation process. I was partnered with Jenkins. We moved to a corner of the common room while the others did the same throughout the space. The atmosphere was tense, paranoid. Every glance felt like an accusation. Every hesitation in answering a question felt like proof of deception. Tell me about your first day at the University of Washington, Jenkins said to me. What happened that made you nearly quit the program? I thought back, remembering. I got lost trying to find my first class. I ended up in the wrong building, walked into an advanced physics lecture by mistake. The professor called me out in front of 200 students. I was so embarrassed I sat in my car for an hour considering dropping out. Jenkins nodded. I remember you telling me that story during our training in Alaska. All right, your turn. I asked him about his daughter's name, about the tattoo on his left shoulder blade, about the reason he had left his previous job. He answered everything correctly, in detail, with the kind of emotional resonance that could not be faked. We were both real, at least as far as we could tell. Around the room, other pairs were conducting similar interrogations. Some passed easily. Others struggled, hesitating over details, getting facts wrong. But was that proof of being a duplicate, or just the normal unreliability of memory under stress? After 20 minutes, Captain Wendell called us back together. Anyone have concerns about their partner? He asked. Silence. Either everyone had passed their tests, or no one wanted to be the first to accuse someone else. Then Timothy raised his hand slowly. I think there is something wrong with Davis. All eyes turned to Davis, Timothy's roommate. Davis was a quiet man in his mid-30s, a marine biologist who had kept mostly to himself during the voyage. He stared back at us with an expression that was difficult to read. What makes you say that? Captain Wendell asked. Timothy swallowed hard. I asked him about his wife, about what she said to him before we left port. He got the details wrong. He said she told him to bring back samples of the ice algae, but I was there when she called him on the satellite phone. She told him to be careful around the polar bears. She was joking about it, making fun of his fear of large animals. Davis would not have forgotten that. He tells that story all the time. Davis stood up slowly. I did not get it wrong. You are misremembering. No, Timothy insisted, his voice gaining strength. I am not. You are not Davis. I do not know what you are, but you are not him. The room erupted in chaos. Reynolds and Jenkins moved to grab Davis, but he was faster. He bolted toward the door, moving with an unnatural speed that no human should possess. I saw Captain Wendell reach for him, but Davis slipped through his grip like water. Stop him, Dr. Foster shouted. But Davis was already gone, disappearing into the corridors of the ship. We heard his footsteps echoing away, growing fainter, until there was only silence. Captain Wendell immediately took charge. Reynolds, Jenkins, Patricia, you are with me. We are going after him. The rest of you lock yourselves in your cabins. Do not open your doors for anyone unless they can provide a password. He thought for a moment. The password is Arctic Dawn. Do not open your door unless you hear those exact words. What if more of them are already aboard? Graves asked. What if some of us are duplicates and we just do not know it yet? It was a terrifying thought. What if the duplication process was gradual? What if we could be replaced without even realizing it, our consciousness somehow transferred or overwritten? Dr. Foster grabbed my arm. "Rook, come with me to the communications room. If the temporal distortion is still active, we might be able to detect it using the radio equipment. We might be able to find out how many of them are aboard." I nodded and followed her out of the common room. Behind us, I could hear Captain Wendell organizing search teams, assigning sectors of the ship to each group. His voice was calm and authoritative, but I could hear the underlying current of fear. We were hunting something that looked exactly like us, that might think it was us, that might have every memory and feeling we had. The corridors were empty as Dr. Foster and I made our way to the communications room. The ship felt different now, hostile somehow, as if it had become aware of our presence and rescented us. Every shadow seemed to hide a threat. Every distant sound could have been footsteps, could have been something approaching. We reached the communications room and I unlocked the door. Everything was as I had left it. The equipment hummed and blinked, oblivious to the crisis unfolding around it. I sat down at the main console while Dr. Foster locked the door behind us. "What exactly are we looking for?" I asked. "Temporal anomalies should create detectable electromagnetic signatures," she explained. "The same kind of interference we see during solar storms or aurora events, but with a different frequency pattern. If we can detect those signatures, we can map where the duplicates are coming from, maybe even predict when new ones will appear." I began adjusting the equipment, scanning through frequencies, looking for anything unusual. The Arctic was always full of strange signals. Atmospheric phenomena created all kinds of interference. Solar radiation, magnetic fluctuations, even the aurora itself could cause false readings. But then I found something, a pattern in the static, regular and repeating. It was like a heartbeat, pulsing at exact intervals, and it was coming from inside the ship. "Dr. Foster, look at this." I pointed at the screen showing the signal analysis. She leaned over my shoulder studying the data, her breath caught. "That is not natural, that is artificial, or at least it is following rules, some kind of structure." I adjusted the directional sensors, trying to pinpoint the source of the signal. The equipment showed 3 distinct points of origin. One was in the engine room, one was in the medical bay, and one was moving through the corridors between decks 2 and 3. "There are 3 of them," I said. "At least 3 duplicates aboard the ship right now." Dr. Foster grabbed the internal phone and tried to call the bridge. The line was dead. She tried the engine room, also dead. "They have cut the communications," she said. "We need to warn the others." Before we could move, the lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in a moment later, bathing everything in a dim red glow. And in that red light, I saw something that made my blood run cold. There was a figure standing at the window, looking in at us from outside. But that was impossible. We were 3 decks up from the main deck. There was nothing out there but freezing air and a 50-foot drop to the ice-covered sea below. The figure pressed its hand against the glass. It was me again. Another version, different from the ones I had seen before. This one looked frozen, its skin blue-white, its eyes glazed with ice. Frost spread across the window where it touched, crystalline patterns forming in the shape of words. "Help US." Dr. Foster and I stared at the message as it formed. "What does it mean?" I whispered. The frozen version of me pressed harder against the glass, and I heard something crack. "It is trying to get in," Dr. Foster said, backing away from the window. The glass cracked further, spiderweb patterns spreading across its surface. The figure outside began to pound on the window with both fists, each impact sending more cracks through the reinforced glass. "We need to leave," I said, grabbing Dr. Foster's arm. "Now." We ran for the door. I fumbled with the lock, my hands shaking. Behind us, the pounding grew louder, more insistent. I heard the glass beginning to give way. We burst out into the corridor just as the window shattered behind us. Cold air rushed in, carrying with it the smell of ice and something else, something wrong, like ozone and decay mixed together. I did not look back. Dr. Foster and I ran through the corridors, not knowing where we were going, knowing only that we had to get away. We heard footsteps behind us, multiple sets, running in perfect synchronization. We turned a corner and nearly collided with Captain Wendell's search team. Reynolds grabbed me by the shoulders, steadying me. "What happened?" he demanded. "The communications room," I gasped. "Something got in. We need to seal off that section." Captain Wendell immediately began issuing orders, but I was no longer listening, because I had just noticed something about his search team. There were 5 people with him, but when he left the common room, he had only taken 3. I looked at each face: Reynolds, Jenkins, Patricia, and 2 others I did not recognize. They wore the same uniforms as us, carried the same equipment, but I had never seen them before in my life. "Captain," I said slowly, "who are they?" Captain Wendell followed my gaze and his face went pale. "I thought they were with you." The 2 strangers looked at each other, then back at us. And then they smiled. It was not a human expression. It was something that had learned to smile by watching humans, but did not quite understand what a smile was supposed to convey. "You cannot stop it," one of them said in a voice that sounded like static given form. "The loop is closing. You have already lost. You lost the moment you entered these waters." The other one spoke, its voice identical to the first. "We are not here to hurt you. We are you, from the time that is coming, from the time that has already been. We are trying to warn you, but you do not listen. You never listen." "Warn us about what?" Dr. Foster demanded. The strangers looked at each other again, and I saw something pass between them, some form of communication that did not require words. Then they looked back at us, and their smiles faded. "The ship," they said in unison. "The ship is not yours anymore. It belongs to the ice now. It belongs to the loop, and soon so will you." Before anyone could react, the strangers turned and walked away, moving in perfect lockstep, their footfalls echoing in identical rhythm. We watched them go, too shocked to follow, too frightened to give chase. Captain Wendell's hands were shaking as he pulled out his radio and tried to contact the bridge. Static was his only answer. He tried the engine room, the medical bay, every station on the ship. Nothing but static. "We have lost control," he said quietly. "Whatever is happening, it is accelerating. The duplicates are multiplying and we cannot tell who is real anymore." I thought about the frozen version of myself pounding on the window, about the message it had left. "Help US. Not help me. Help us." Plural. As if all the versions of myself across all the possible timelines were trapped in this loop together, all suffering, all trying to break free. And then I understood. The distress call I had received at the beginning of this nightmare, my own voice screaming for help, it had not been a warning. It had been a plea. From a version of me that had already lived through this. A version that had failed to escape. A version that was now trapped in the loop forever, reliving the same horror again and again. We were not being invaded by duplicates. We were becoming them. The loop was turning us into ghosts of ourselves, multiplying us across time, creating infinite versions all trapped in the same nightmare. "How do we stop it?" I asked Dr. Foster. "If this is a temporal loop, there has to be a way to break the cycle." She shook her head. "I do not know. The Arctic Dawn crew never found a way. They just kept repeating the same events over and over until they destroyed themselves." "But we know something they did not," I said, thinking quickly. "We know about the loop. We know what is happening. That gives us an advantage. We can make different choices. We can change the outcome." "Or," Reynolds said grimly, "the knowledge itself is part of the loop. Maybe every iteration, every repetition, we learn about the loop, and every time we fail to escape it. Maybe that is our hell, to almost understand, to almost solve it, but never quite reach the truth." It was a horrifying thought, but I could not deny its logic. How many times had we been through this already? How many versions of ourselves had stood in this exact spot, having this exact conversation, believing they could break free, only to fail and loop back to the beginning? I felt despair beginning to creep in, cold and suffocating like the Arctic waters surrounding us. But then I remembered something. The text file in the communications system. Run. It was not a warning to flee. It was an instruction, a command. Maybe from a version of myself that had figured something out. A version that was trying to pass a message forward through time. Run, but run where? Run when, and run from what? The answer, I realized, was hidden somewhere in the chaos. Hidden in the messages, in the appearances of the duplicates, in the pattern of events. All I had to do was find it before the loop closed completely. Before we all became ghosts trapped in the ice forever. The engine room was burning. We had split into two groups after the encounter with the strangers. Captain Wendell took Reynolds and Patricia down to the engine room to check on the power systems. Dr. Foster, Jenkins, and I headed toward the bridge to try to re-establish communications with the outside world. We had barely made it up 2 decks when the explosion shook the entire ship. The floor tilted beneath my feet. I grabbed onto a railing as alarms began screaming throughout the vessel. Through the nearest porthole, I could see thick black smoke pouring from the ventilation shafts on the lower deck. The acrid smell of burning metal and electrical fires filled the corridors within seconds. "We need to get to them," Jenkins shouted over the noise. But Dr. Foster grabbed his arm. "No, that is what it wants us to do. Do you not see? The loop is hurting us, forcing us to make predictable choices. Every time we react the way it expects, we reinforce the pattern." "People are dying down there," Jenkins protested, his face red with anger and fear. "People are already dead," Dr. Foster said coldly. "They died the moment we entered these waters. Everything since then has been an echo, a repetition. We are not trying to save them. We are trying to break the cycle before it claims us too." I understood what she meant, but the logic felt monstrous. How could we abandon our crewmates? How could we choose knowledge over compassion, pattern recognition over basic human decency? Yet something in Dr. Foster's eyes told me she was right. She had studied the Arctic Dawn incident. She knew how it ended, and she was terrified that we were following the exact same path. "Then what do we do?" I asked. She pulled out a small notebook from her pocket, one I had not seen before. The pages were filled with dense handwriting, diagrams, and what looked like mathematical equations. I have been keeping notes since we encountered the first anomaly, tracking every event, every appearance of a duplicate, every temporal inconsistency, and I have found a pattern. She flipped through the pages rapidly, showing us timelines that branched and merged, circles within circles, a visual representation of the loop we were trapped in. "Look at this. Every major event happens in multiples of 13 minutes. The distress call came at 2:47 a.m. The collision happened at 3:00 a.m., exactly 13 minutes later. The lights went out at 3:13 a.m. The explosion just now occurred at 3:26 a.m. Jenkins stared at the notebook. "So what does that mean? We are on some kind of timetable." "More than that," Dr. Foster said. "The loop has structure. It repeats in cycles but with variations. Each iteration, things change slightly. People make different choices. Events unfold in different orders. But certain anchor points remain constant. The 13-minute intervals are anchor points. Moments when the timeline stabilizes, when cause and effect lock into place." I thought about this, my mind racing. So if we can disrupt one of those anchor points, we might be able to break the cycle. In theory, yes, but it is more complicated than that. The anchor points are protected. Every time we try to deviate from the expected pattern, the loop course corrects. It creates obstacles. It manufactures emergencies that force us back into line. She gestured toward the burning engine room below us. "Like that explosion. I guarantee that if we go down there to help, we will find something that traps us, that delays us, that keeps us from reaching the next anchor point in time to disrupt it. Jenkins looked between us, his expression torn. This is insane. You are talking about the universe itself conspiring against us, about time being a living thing that wants to keep us trapped. Not the universe, Dr. Foster corrected. The Arctic, this place, these waters. Something about this region creates the conditions for temporal loops. Maybe it is the magnetic field. Maybe it is some kind of quantum phenomenon we do not yet understand. But it is real and it is hostile and it will kill us if we let it. Through the porthole, I could see the duplicate ship again. It was closer now, running parallel to us about 30 yards away. In the glow of our burning engine room, I could make out more details of its crew. They were all standing at the railing watching us, all 12 of them, and they were all on fire. Their clothes burned, their hair burned, their skin blackened and cracked, but they did not scream, they did not move. They simply stood there burning, staring at us with hollow eyes. "They are showing us," I whispered. "They are showing us what happens if we make the wrong choice." Dr. Foster followed my gaze and her face went pale. "My God, that is the timeline where we go down to help. We get trapped in the fire. We burn." She grabbed my arm with desperate strength. "We cannot go down there, Rook. No matter what we hear, no matter who calls for help, we cannot go down there." But even as she said it, we heard voices rising from the lower deck, screaming, begging. Captain Wendell's voice, hoarse with pain, calling out for help. Patricia crying out that she could not breathe, that the smoke was too thick, that the heat was melting her skin. Jenkins turned toward the stairwell leading down. I saw the conflict written across his face. Every instinct, every shred of human decency was telling him to go help them. But Dr. Foster's words held him in place, paralyzed by the terrible logic of her argument. "We have to do something," he said, his voice breaking. "We are doing something," Dr. Foster replied. "We are surviving. We are breaking the pattern. And maybe, just maybe, that will save them too. If we can collapse the loop, none of this will have happened. They will never have entered the engine room. The fire will never have started." It was cold comfort, and we all knew it. But what choice did we have? We could run toward the screams and become burning ghosts like the crew of the duplicate ship. Or we could stay our course, trust in Dr. Foster's theory, and hope that we could somehow rewrite reality itself. The next anchor point was at 3:39 a.m. We had 13 minutes to reach it, 13 minutes to figure out how to disrupt the pattern. "Where is the next anchor point?" I asked. "Where do we need to be?" Dr. Foster consulted her notebook. "Based on the pattern, the next major event should occur in the cargo hold. That is where the Arctic Dawn crew made their final stand. That is where the loop became permanent for them." We ran through the corridors, leaving the screams behind us. I tried not to think about Captain Wendell burning alive. I tried not to imagine Patricia's final moments. I told myself that Dr. Foster was right, that this was the only way, that we were saving them by abandoning them. But I did not believe it, not really. I just kept running because stopping meant facing the horror of what we had done. The cargo hold was located at the stern of the ship, 3 decks down. It was where we stored our scientific equipment, ice core samples, and emergency supplies. As we descended, I noticed that the temperature was dropping. My breath came out in visible clouds. Frost was forming on the metal walls, spreading in intricate crystalline patterns that looked almost deliberate, almost like writing. "Do you see that?" Jenkins asked, pointing at the frost patterns. I looked closer. The patterns were not random. They formed letters, words, entire sentences in a language that was almost English but not quite. The grammar was wrong, the spelling twisted. It was as if someone was trying to write in English but could only remember how the language worked in fragments, in pieces. "Turn back, turn forward, turn inward, turn. Nowhere time eats itself, here time, births. Itself, here you are the loop, you are the anchor, you are the pattern that repeats forever." It is trying to communicate, Dr. Foster said, running her hand along the frost. Or warn us. Or maybe it is just describing what is happening. The boundaries between cause and effect are breaking down here. We reached the cargo hold door at 3:37 a.m., 2 minutes before the anchor point. The door was sealed, which was unusual. Cargo holds were never locked during normal operations. I tried the electronic keypad, but it was dead. No power, no response. "We need to get this open," Dr. Foster said urgently. "We need to be inside when the anchor point occurs. That is when the timeline is most vulnerable. That is when we can disrupt it." Jenkins pulled out a manual override tool from his belt. He was an engineer. He knew every system on this ship. He began working on the door's mechanical lock, his fingers moving quickly despite the cold. "What are we going to do once we are inside?" I asked Dr. Foster. She hesitated. "I am not entirely certain, but the cargo hold contains all our ice core samples. Samples we took from this exact region over the past 3 weeks. Those samples contain physical matter from the temporal anomaly zone. If we can somehow use them to create a feedback loop, to introduce a contradiction into the pattern, it might destabilize the entire cycle." "That sounds like a guess," I said. "It is an educated guess," she admitted, "based on quantum mechanics and temporal theory. But yes, fundamentally it is a guess. Do you have a better idea?" I did not. We were operating on desperation and hope, nothing more. But hope was all we had left. Jenkins got the door open at 3:38 a.m., 1 minute to spare. We rushed inside and sealed the door behind us. The cargo hold was vast, filled with metal shelving units that held our equipment and samples. Emergency lighting cast everything in a sickly yellow glow. And there, in the center of the hold, was another version of Dr. Foster. This one was different from the other duplicates we had seen. She looked older, her hair streaked with gray that the real Dr. Foster did not have. Her face was lined with age and exhaustion. She wore the same clothes, but they were tattered and stained with what looked like decades of wear. "You made it," the older Dr. Foster said, her voice rough with emotion. "After all these iterations, you finally made it to the right place at the right time." The younger Dr. Foster stepped forward, staring at her older self with a mixture of fear and fascination. "Who are you? When are you from?" "I am you," the older version replied. "From the loop you are trying to break. I have been trapped in this cycle for 17 years, or 17 minutes, or 17 seconds. Time has no meaning here anymore. I have lived through this night 10,000 times, and each time I learn a little more. Each time I get a little closer to understanding." "Understanding what?" I asked. The older Dr. Foster turned to look at me, and her eyes were filled with a sadness so profound it made my heart ache. "Understanding that there is no escape, Rook. The loop cannot be broken because the loop is what keeps us alive. We are not trapped in time. We are made of time. The moment we entered these waters, the moment we crossed into the anomaly zone, we stopped being real. We became echoes, shadows, possibilities that never quite solidified into actual events." "No," the younger Dr. Foster said firmly. "That cannot be true. We are real. We have mass, we have thoughts, we have agency." "Do we?" the older version challenged. "Or are we just patterns repeating? Electrical impulses following the same paths over and over? Look at yourself, Elaine. Look at the choices you have made tonight. Every decision, every word, every movement, it was all predicted. It was all part of the pattern. You never had free will. You have just been following the script that was written the moment the loop began." Jenkins spoke up, his voice defiant. "If that is true, then why are you here? Why are you trying to warn us? If we are just automatons following a predetermined pattern, what is the point?" The older Dr. Foster smiled sadly. "Because even patterns can dream, Jenkins. Even echoes can hope. And maybe, just maybe, if I repeat this warning enough times, across enough iterations, one version of you will finally hear it. One version will finally understand what needs to be done." "And what is that?" I asked. "What needs to be done?" She walked over to one of the shelving units and pulled out an ice core sample container. Inside was a cylinder of translucent ice, shot through with dark striations. This sample came from the exact center of the anomaly zone. We drilled it 1 week ago. Do you remember, Rook? You were there. You helped us pull it up from 300 meters below the ocean floor. I did remember. It had been a difficult extraction. The ice was unusually dense, and the drilling equipment had malfunctioned several times. But we had persisted and finally retrieved the sample intact. "Look closer," the older Dr. Foster said, holding the container up to the light. I stepped forward and examined the ice. The dark striations were not mineral deposits or trapped sediment as I had assumed. They were something else, something organic. And as I looked closer, I realized they were moving, shifting, rearranging themselves within the frozen matrix. "What is that?" I breathed. "The source," she replied. "This ice is not from the past. It is from the future, or perhaps from outside time altogether. Something happened here, something catastrophic, something that tore a hole in the fabric of space-time. And this ice formed around that wound, preserving it, containing it. As long as this sample exists, the loop exists. It is the anchor point, the origin point, the beginning and the end." Dr. Foster, the younger one, understood immediately. "You are saying we need to destroy it. If we destroy this sample, we destroy the loop." "Yes," the older version confirmed. "But understand what that means. The loop is not just a prison, it is also a shelter. It has protected us from the full force of the temporal anomaly. If we destroy the sample, we release that energy. We expose ourselves to the raw temporal distortion. It will not simply set us free, it will unmake us. We will cease to have ever existed." The room fell silent. We were being offered a choice. Remain trapped in the loop forever, living and dying and living again in an endless cycle. Or destroy ourselves completely, erase our existence from reality, but potentially close the anomaly and prevent anyone else from falling into the same trap. It was 3:39 a.m. The anchor point had arrived. Outside the cargo hold, I could hear footsteps, many footsteps moving in perfect synchronization. The duplicates were gathering, all the versions of ourselves from all the possible timelines, converging on this moment, on this choice. "We have to decide now," the older Dr. Foster said. "Once the anchor point passes, the opportunity will be lost for another 13 minutes, and I do not know if we will survive that long. The loop is collapsing. The iterations are getting shorter. Soon, there will be nothing left but the moment of death, repeated infinitely." I looked at Jenkins, then at Dr. Foster. I saw my own fear reflected in their eyes, but I also saw determination. We had not come this far, had not abandoned Captain Wendell and the others, had not walked through this nightmare, only to give up now. "How do we destroy it?" I asked. The older Dr. Foster handed me a flare gun. "Fire burns at a temperature hot enough to break the molecular bonds holding the temporal anomaly in place. But you need to be the one to do it, Rook. You were the first to encounter the loop. You received the first distress call. In a very real sense, you are the prime version, the original. If anyone can break the cycle, it is you." I took the flare gun with trembling hands. It felt impossibly heavy, as if it contained the weight of all the possible futures, all the lives we had lived and would live in the endless repetition of the loop. "What will happen to you?" I asked the older Dr. Foster. "If I do this?" "I will finally rest," she said softly. "I will finally stop." I loaded the flare into the gun and pointed it at the ice core sample. The older Dr. Foster placed the container on the floor between us. Through the walls of the cargo hold, I could hear the duplicates pounding on the doors, trying to get in. Their voices rose in a cacophony of warnings and pleas, all of them speaking at once, creating a sound that was almost like singing. "Do it," Dr. Foster said, the younger one, the one who had not yet lived through 17 years of hell. "Whatever happens, it has to be better than this." I thought about that for a moment. Was she right? Was non-existence better than eternal imprisonment? Was the peace of oblivion preferable to the agony of infinite repetition? I decided that it was. I decided that we deserved an ending, even if that ending was total erasure. I pulled the trigger. The flare struck the ice core sample and exploded in a burst of brilliant red light. The ice shattered, and from within it came a sound like reality itself screaming. The walls of the cargo hold began to ripple and distort. Time became visible, flowing like liquid through the air, past and future mixing together in impossible ways. I saw myself as a child, playing in the snow in my backyard in Seattle. I saw myself as an old man, dying alone in a hospital bed. I saw myself on the Northern Passage for the first time, excited and nervous. I saw myself burning in the engine room, drowning in the Arctic waters, frozen in the ice, torn apart by duplicates that wore my face. All of it was happening simultaneously. All of it was real. All of it was me. And then slowly it began to fade. The images grew dimmer, less substantial. The sound of reality screaming diminished to a whisper, then to silence. The walls of the cargo hold stopped rippling. Time stopped flowing. Everything stopped. I found myself standing in darkness, absolute and complete. No ship, no ice, no Arctic, just void. And in that void I heard a voice. My own voice, but somehow containing all the voices of all my duplicates, all speaking as one. You did it, Rook. You broke the loop. But you also broke reality. Now you must choose. Rebuild it as it was, with the loop intact but dormant, and accept that you will always carry the memory of this night. Or let it collapse completely and give yourself the peace of forgetting. I thought about Captain Wendell burning in the engine room, about Patricia crying for help, about Jenkins and Dr. Foster, who had trusted me to make the right choice, about the older Dr. Foster, who had spent 17 years trying to find a way out. I choose to remember, I said into the darkness. I choose to rebuild, but I also choose to change. I will not let this happen again. I will not let anyone else fall into this trap. The darkness began to recede. Light returned, slowly at first, then faster. I found myself standing in the cargo hold again. Jenkins and Dr. Foster were beside me. The ice core sample container lay on the floor, empty, its contents scattered as harmless powder. But something was different. The ship was not moving. The engines had stopped. And when I checked my watch, I saw that it read 2:30 a.m. We had gone backward. The loop had been reset, but we retained our memories. We had been given a second chance. Dr. Foster looked at me, her eyes wide with understanding. You saved us, she said. You brought us back. No, I replied. We saved ourselves, all of us, every version. We finally worked together instead of fighting each other. Jenkins walked to the cargo hold door and opened it. Beyond was not the corridor of the Northern Passage, but something else entirely. A vast expanse of ice stretching to the horizon, beneath a sky filled with impossible colors. And standing on that ice, about 100 yards away, was the duplicate ship. But it was not damaged anymore. It was pristine, new, as if it had just been launched. And its crew was standing on the deck, waving at us. Not in warning, not in threat, but in farewell. As we watched, the duplicate ship began to fade, becoming translucent, then transparent, then disappearing completely, taking with it all the other timelines, all the other versions, all the ghosts we had created. We were alone again, real again, singular again. What do we do now? Jenkins asked. I looked at Dr. Foster, and she smiled. A real smile, not the tight expression of fear and determination I had seen all night. Now, she said, we get out of these waters, we go home, and we make damn sure no one ever comes back here. It sounded like a good plan to me. The ice beneath our feet should not have been solid. We were standing on what had been the cargo hold floor moments ago, but now we were outside, exposed to the Arctic wind. The Northern Passage was gone. Or rather, it existed somewhere else, in some other version of reality that we could no longer access. The three of us stood together on an endless plain of ice, surrounded by nothing but frozen emptiness and the strange, shifting colors in the sky above. "This is not right," Jenkins said, his breath coming in ragged clouds. "We should be freezing. We are not wearing proper cold weather gear. We should be dead in minutes out here." He was correct. We were dressed in the standard shipboard clothing, thermal jumpsuits that were meant for indoor use, not Arctic survival. The temperature had to be at least -30 degrees, possibly lower with the wind chill. Yet I felt no cold, no numbness, no pain. It was as if the laws of physics had become optional. Dr. Foster knelt down and touched the ice with her bare hand. "It is not real ice," she said, "or it is ice that does not behave the way ice should. It is warm, room temperature, and look at this." She pressed harder and her hand sank into the surface, passing through it like water. "We are not in the physical world anymore. We are somewhere else, somewhere between." "Between what?" I asked, though I was not sure I wanted to know the answer. "Between the loop and reality, between what was and what could be. When you destroyed the ice core sample, you did not just break the temporal cycle. You tore open a pathway to the space outside of time, the place where broken timelines go to die." I looked around at the vast emptiness surrounding us. "So, we are in a graveyard for dead realities." "In a sense, yes," Dr. Foster confirmed. She stood up, brushing ice crystals from her hands even though the substance left no moisture behind. "But it is also a crossroads. Every timeline that was ever created, every possibility that was ever considered, they all pass through here at some point. We can see them if we know how to look." She pointed toward the horizon and I followed her gaze. In the distance I could see shapes moving. Ships, dozens of them, hundreds, all variations of the Northern Passage, each one slightly different from the others. Some were pristine and new. Others were rusted wrecks barely holding together. Some were on fire. Some were capsized, their hulls pointing toward the strange sky. And every single one was crewed by versions of us. I saw myself on those ships. Thousands of versions, each one a reflection of a choice I might have made, a path I might have taken. In one ship I saw a version of myself that had gone down to the engine room to help Captain Wendell. That version was burned and dying, his skin blackened, his eyes filled with agony. In another ship, I saw a version that had never left the communications room, who had locked himself inside and gone mad from isolation, scratching messages into the walls with his fingernails. Some versions looked triumphant, as if they had found a way to escape. Others looked defeated, broken, lost. And a very few, looked back at me with expressions of recognition, as if they could see me just as clearly as I could see them. "How many times did we go through the loop?" I asked quietly. "Thousands," Dr. Foster replied. "Tens of thousands, perhaps. Every time we made a choice, the timeline split. Every time we encountered a duplicate, new possibilities were created. The loop was not just repeating, it was multiplying, branching, creating an infinite tree of failed timelines." "But we broke it," Jenkins said. "We destroyed the source. So why are we still here? Why have we not returned to normal reality?" Dr. Foster hesitated, and I saw uncertainty cross her face for the first time since we had entered this strange space. "I do not know. Perhaps the damage was too severe. Perhaps we are too entangled with the broken timelines to fully separate ourselves. Or perhaps," she trailed off, not wanting to complete the thought. "Perhaps we died when the loop broke," I finished for her. "Perhaps we are just ghosts now, like all the other versions." The thought should have terrified me, but instead I felt a strange calm. If we were dead, if we were just echoes waiting to fade, then at least we had accomplished something. We had stopped the loop. We had prevented future crews from falling into the same trap. That had to count for something. But Jenkins was not ready to accept that conclusion. "No," he said firmly. "No, we are not dead. We can think, we can move, we can make choices. That means we are alive. That means there is still a way out of this." "Then we need to find it," I said. Dr. Foster, you studied the Arctic Dawn incident. You know more about temporal anomalies than anyone. If there is a way back to reality, you will figure it out. She nodded slowly, her scientific mind already working on the problem. The key is understanding what makes a timeline real versus what makes it a possibility. Every timeline we can see here exists in a state of quantum uncertainty. They are neither fully real nor fully imaginary. But our original timeline, the one we came from before we entered the loop, that one has solidity. It has history. It has cause and effect that extend beyond this moment. So we need to find our way back to that timeline, Jenkins said. How do we do that? Dr. Foster looked at the ships scattered across the ice plain. We follow the thread. Every timeline is connected to the one that spawned it. If we can trace our way backward through all the iterations and splits, we can find the moment before the loop began. The moment when we were still fully real. It sounded impossible, but we had already done the impossible several times tonight. What was one more miracle? We started walking. There was no clear direction on the ice plain, no landmarks to guide us, but Dr. Foster seemed to have an instinct for which way to go. She would stop occasionally, close her eyes, and tilt her head as if listening to something the rest of us could not hear. "What are you sensing?" I asked during one of these pauses. "Resonance," she replied. "Every timeline has a unique vibrational frequency, a signature that distinguishes it from the others. Our original timeline is calling to us, pulling at us. I can feel it like a thread tied around my heart. We just need to follow that feeling." As we walked, we passed close to some of the other ships. I tried not to look at the crews, tried not to see the ways they had suffered and died, but it was impossible to ignore. One ship had a crew that had turned on each other, their frozen bodies locked in combat on the deck. Another had a crew that had simply given up, sitting in a circle on the ice, holding hands as they waited for the end. And then I saw something that made me stop in my tracks. One of the ships was different from the others. It was not a variation of the Northern Passage. It was older, painted in different colors with a different name on its hull. The Arctic Dawn. "Dr. Foster," I called out, "look." She turned and saw what I was seeing. Her face went pale. "That is impossible. The Arctic Dawn was lost 3 years ago. It should not be here." But it was here, as real as any of the other ghost ships. And standing on its deck was a single figure, waving at us, calling us over. We approached cautiously. As we got closer, I could see that the figure was a woman in her 50s, wearing a captain's uniform that was tattered and faded. Her face was weathered, her eyes haunted, but she smiled when she saw us. "You made it further than we did," she said, her voice carrying across the ice despite the distance. "You actually broke the loop. We never managed that. We just kept repeating until there was nothing left of us but the memory of repetition." "Are you Captain Morrison?" Dr. Foster asked, "the commander of the Arctic Dawn?" The woman nodded. "Or what is left of her. I have been trapped here since the loop collapsed, watching, waiting, hoping that someone would come along who could finish what we started." "What did you start?" I asked. Captain Morrison gestured at the ice plain around us. "We tried to map the anomaly. We tried to understand its structure, its rules. We thought if we could understand it, we could control it. But we were wrong. The anomaly does not have rules. It has hunger. It consumes timelines, feeds on possibilities, grows stronger with every iteration. We did not break the loop because we were part of what it was feeding on. We made it stronger." "But we broke it," Jenkins insisted. "We destroyed the ice core sample. We collapsed the cycle." "You broke your loop," Captain Morrison corrected. "But the anomaly itself is still active. It is still consuming timelines. Yours, mine, countless others that came before and will come after. You did not destroy it. You just freed yourselves from one of its tentacles." The implications of this were staggering. If Captain Morrison was right, then the temporal anomaly was not a single phenomenon but a massive entity that spanned across multiple incidents, multiple ships, multiple loops. The Arctic dawn had been one meal. The Northern Passage was another, and there would be more unless someone found a way to destroy the anomaly at its source. Where is the source? Dr. Foster demanded. If the anomaly has a center, a point of origin, we can target it. We can end this permanently. Captain Morrison pointed toward the horizon, toward a direction that felt fundamentally wrong, as if the compass of reality itself was broken there. It is that way, at the heart of the ice, where time began to fracture. But I warn you, if you go there, you will not come back. The source is not just a place. It is a moment. The moment when everything went wrong. And you cannot change a moment without erasing yourself from the timeline entirely. I thought about this, about sacrifice, about the price of fixing what had been broken. If we erase ourselves but we save everyone else, everyone who might fall into this trap in the future, is that not worth it? Jenkins put a hand on my shoulder. Rook, think about what you are saying. You are talking about suicide, about not just dying but never having existed at all. I know, I said quietly. But look around you, Jenkins. Look at all these ships, all these versions of ourselves, all suffering endlessly because the anomaly was never stopped. If we have a chance to end that, do we not have an obligation to try? Dr. Foster stepped forward. Rook is right. We have a responsibility. We have knowledge that no one else has. We have survived further than any other crew. If we turn back now, if we try to save ourselves, we will just be passing the curse along to whoever comes next. Jenkins looked between us, his expression tortured. I have a family, he said finally. I have a daughter who is waiting for me to come home. If I erase myself from existence, she will never have been born. My wife will never have met me. Everything I have ever done, everyone I have ever helped, it will all vanish as if it never happened. It was a valid argument. The weight of it hung heavy in the air between us. How could we ask Jenkins to sacrifice not just his life, but his entire existence? How could we ask that of anyone? But then Captain Morrison spoke again. I had a family too, she said softly. A husband and 2 sons. I thought about them every day I was trapped in the loop. I wondered if they missed me, if they were grieving, if they would move on. And do you know what I realized? If I could go back and prevent the Arctic dawn from ever entering these waters, even if it meant never meeting my husband, never having my children, I would do it. Because the love I have for them is stronger than my need to exist. I want them to be happy, even in a world where I was never born. Her words struck something deep inside me. I thought about my own life, my own choices. I thought about the people I had known, the relationships I had built. Would they be better off in a world where I had never existed? Would the universe be improved by my absence? I did not know, but I knew that I could not walk away from this. Not now, not after everything we had been through. I am going to the source, I announced. I am going to try to close the anomaly. You too can come with me, or you can try to find your way back to reality. I will not judge either choice. Dr. Foster did not hesitate. I am coming with you. Jenkins closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and let it out slowly. When he opened his eyes again, they were filled with resolve. My daughter would want me to do the right thing, he said. Even if it means she never gets to know me, even if it means she never exists, she would want me to save others. He nodded. I am coming too. Relief flooded through me. I had not wanted to face this alone. Together, we turned toward the direction Captain Morrison had indicated, toward the heart of the anomaly. Wait, Captain Morrison called out. We turned back to see her climbing down from the Arctic dawn. I am coming too. I have been waiting 3 years for a chance to finish this. I am not missing it now. The 4 of us stood together on the ice, an unlikely alliance of survivors from different disasters, different timelines, different moments. But we shared a common purpose. We would end the anomaly or die trying. We walked for what felt like hours, though time had no real meaning in this place. The ships around us grew denser, more numerous, until we were walking through a graveyard of vessels that stretched as far as the eye could see. Not just research ships like ours, but cargo vessels, military craft, fishing boats, even ancient wooden ships that looked like they had come from centuries past. How long has this been happening? I wondered aloud. Forever, Captain Morrison replied. The anomaly is ancient. It existed before humans came to the Arctic, before there were ships to trap. It has been feeding on time itself, growing stronger with each meal, each iteration, each loop. Then how do we kill something that has existed forever? Jenkins asked. We do not kill it, Dr. Foster said. We cannot, but we can seal it. We can close the wound in spacetime that allows it to reach into our reality. Think of it like sealing a breach in a ship's hull. The ocean does not stop existing, but you prevent it from flooding in. As we walked, I noticed that the ice beneath our feet was changing. It was becoming darker, more translucent, and I could see shapes moving beneath the surface. Shadows, figures, entire timelines compressed and frozen in the ice like insects trapped in amber. I knelt down and looked closer at one of the shapes. It was a ship, impossibly small, moving through frozen water that would never thaw. Its crew were still alive in there, still living out their doomed voyage in miniature, repeating the same actions over and over in a space no larger than my hand. Do not look too closely, Captain Morrison warned. The compressed timelines can be mesmerizing. People have been known to lose themselves staring into them, trying to find their own reflections, their own possibilities. You can waste eternity wondering about roads not taken. I stood up quickly, disturbed by what I had seen. How many of those compressed timelines contained versions of me? How many rooks were trapped in that ice, living and dying in spaces too small to contain them? If you have stayed with me this far, if you have followed my story through all its twists and impossibilities, then I want to ask you something. Have you ever wondered about the choices you did not make, the lives you did not live? Do you ever feel like there are other versions of yourself out there, living in parallel, making different decisions? If so, then you understand what we were experiencing. And if this resonates with you, please share this story. Let others know what can happen when time breaks down. Let them know that every choice matters, that every moment is precious, because it might be the only one you get. The ice plain began to slope downward, leading us into what looked like a vast crater. At the bottom of the crater was something I can barely describe. It was a hole in reality, a tear in the fabric of existence itself. It pulsed with colors that should not exist, with light that cast shadows in impossible directions. And from it emanated a sound that was not quite sound, a vibration that I felt in my bones, in my teeth, in the marrow of my existence. That is it, Captain Morrison said. That is the source, the wound that birthed the anomaly. We stood at the edge of the crater, looking down at the impossible thing at its center. I could feel it pulling at me, trying to draw me in, trying to add me to its collection of consumed timelines. It was hungry, always hungry, and it would never be satisfied. How do we seal it? I asked. Dr. Foster pulled out her notebook, the one she had been keeping throughout this ordeal. She tore out a page and handed it to me. On it was a diagram, a mathematical equation, a representation of the seal we would need to create. We need to anchor reality around the wound, she explained. Create a stable perimeter that prevents the anomaly from reaching outward. But anchors require mass, substance, something real and solid. And the only real things in this place are us. I understood. We would not just be sealing the wound. We would become the seal. Our bodies, our minds, our very existences would be used as the foundation for a barrier that would hold the anomaly in check. We would be frozen here forever, conscious but unable to move, aware but unable to act, serving as eternal guardians to prevent the anomaly from spreading. It was a fate worse than death. It was a fate worse than the loop, but it was necessary. Are we all in agreement? I asked, looking at each of my companions. Dr. Foster nodded. Jenkins nodded. Captain Morrison smiled sadly and nodded as well. Then let us end this, I said. We walked down into the crater together, hand in hand, approaching the wound in reality. As we got closer, I could feel the anomaly trying to resist us, trying to push us back. It did not want to be sealed. It wanted to continue feeding, continue growing, continue consuming timelines until there was nothing left but itself. But we were stronger. We were real in a way that the anomaly was not. We had made choices, lived lives, loved and lost and learned. That reality, that solidity of existence, was more powerful than the anomaly's hunger. When we reached the edge of the wound, we stopped. Dr. Foster began to recite the equation from her notebook, her voice steady and clear. As she spoke, I felt something changing. The ice beneath our feet began to glow. Lines of light spread out from where we stood, forming a geometric pattern around the wound, a cage of mathematics and will. The anomaly screamed, not with sound but with raw temporal energy. I saw futures that would never happen. I saw pasts that had been erased. I saw presents that existed in contradiction to each other. It was trying to overwhelm us, trying to break our concentration, trying to make us doubt. But we held firm. Jenkins gripped my hand tighter. Captain Morrison closed her eyes and continued the recitation with Dr. Foster. And I added my own voice to theirs, speaking words I did not understand but that felt right, felt true. The seal began to form. We could see it taking shape, a barrier of crystallized reality wrapping around the wound, layer by layer growing stronger with each word we spoke. And as it grew, I felt myself beginning to fade, not dying but transforming, becoming part of the seal itself. My body began to dissolve into light. I could see the same thing happening to the others. We were becoming the barrier, our essences woven into the fabric of the seal, holding the anomaly in check through sheer force of will and sacrifice. In my final moments of individual consciousness, I saw something beautiful. I saw the thousands of ghost ships around us beginning to fade. The broken timelines were being released, set free from the anomaly's grip. The crews were disappearing, not into oblivion, but into peace. They were finally being allowed to end, to rest, to stop repeating their traumas over and over. And I saw our original timeline, the Northern Passage as it had been before we entered the anomaly zone. I saw Captain Wendell alive and well on the bridge. I saw Patricia and Reynolds going about their duties. I saw myself in the communications room, young and whole and unaware of what was to come. The loop had been broken, reality had been restored, and we had paid the price for it. As my consciousness merged with the seal, I felt a strange contentment. We had done it. We had saved everyone who might have come after us. We had ended the cycle of suffering. And even though we would exist now only as guardians, as frozen sentinels watching over a wound in time, it was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything. I existed without existing. Time passed without passing. I was aware of everything and nothing simultaneously. My consciousness had become part of the seal, woven into the barrier that held the anomaly in check. I could feel Jenkins beside me, his presence a steady warmth in the cold mathematics of our prison. Dr. Foster was there too, her brilliant mind still working even in this crystallized state, constantly calculating, constantly reinforcing the seal. And Captain Morrison, who had waited 3 years for this moment, radiated a quiet satisfaction that bordered on joy. We were the guardians now, the watchers, the eternal sentinels who stood between reality and the hungry void that wanted to consume it. But something was wrong. I could feel it in the fabric of the seal itself, a trembling, a weakness. The anomaly had not accepted its imprisonment quietly. It was testing the barriers, probing for weaknesses, searching for a way to break free. And it was learning. With each probe, each test, it grew more sophisticated, more cunning. How long had we been here? Days, years, centuries. Time had no meaning in this place, but I could feel the weight of duration pressing down on us. The seal was holding, but it was not permanent. Nothing was permanent. Eventually, it would fail. And when it did, the anomaly would be free again, hungrier than ever, ready to consume not just ships, but entire regions, entire oceans, perhaps the entire world. We had not ended the threat, we had only delayed it. The realization was devastating. We had sacrificed everything, erased ourselves from existence, condemned ourselves to an eternity of frozen awareness, and it had not been enough. The anomaly was too strong, too ancient, too fundamentally opposed to the concept of reality to be contained forever. I felt despair beginning to creep in, a darkness that threatened to overwhelm the light of our combined consciousnesses. But then Dr. Foster's presence flared, bright and determined, pushing back against the darkness. "Do not give up," her voice echoed through the seal, not as sound but as pure thought. "We knew this might happen. I prepared for this contingency." "What contingency?" I asked, my own thoughts barely coherent after so long without individual form. "Before we entered the crater, I left instructions in my notebook, coordinates, frequencies, a message for anyone who might find it. If the seal begins to fail, someone will come. Someone will finish what we started." "Who?" Jenkins demanded. "Who would even know to look for your notebook? Who would believe it?" "I do not know," Dr. Foster admitted. "But I have to believe that someone will, that our sacrifice will not be in vain, that the universe has a way of finding the people it needs when it needs them." It was a thin hope, barely more substantial than a wish, but it was all we had. So we waited. We held the seal together through force of will alone, fighting against the anomaly's constant attempts to break free. Every moment was a struggle, every second stretched into eternity, but we did not give up. We could not give up. And then, impossibly, we heard something. A radio transmission. It should not have been possible. We were outside of normal spacetime, trapped in a pocket dimension of our own making. No signals should have been able to reach us here, but the transmission came through anyway, crackling with static but unmistakably real. "This is the research vessel Polar Star to any station receiving. We have discovered an anomaly at coordinates 73 degrees north, 158 degrees west. We are investigating. If anyone can hear this, please respond." Those were the coordinates Dr. Foster had written down. Someone had found her notebook. Someone was coming. "No," Captain Morrison's voice rang out across the seal. "They need to turn back. If they come here, they will be consumed just like we were. The anomaly will use them to break free." "Not if we warn them," I said. "Not if we tell them what we learned. They can destroy the anomaly from outside, from reality itself, before it has a chance to create another loop." "How?" Jenkins asked. "We are trapped here. We cannot communicate with them. We cannot even exist in their timeline anymore." But Dr. Foster had already figured it out. I felt her consciousness reaching outward, stretching toward the source of the radio transmission. She was using the seal itself as a transmitter, converting our crystallized existence into electromagnetic waves that could bridge the gap between dimensions. "This is Dr. Elaine Foster of the Northern Passage," her voice crackled through the static. "Do not approach the anomaly. Repeat, do not approach. We are transmitting critical information. You must destroy the source before it creates a temporal loop." There was a long pause. Then a voice replied, male, young, uncertain. "This is Lieutenant Marcus Webb of the Polar Star. Your transmission is breaking up. Did you say you are from the Northern Passage? That vessel was lost with all hands 3 years ago." 3 years. We had been holding the seal for 3 years in the outside world. It felt like centuries to us, but only 3 years had passed in reality. Time truly was broken here. "Listen carefully," Dr. Foster continued, her voice straining with the effort of maintaining the connection. "The anomaly is a wound in spacetime. It feeds on temporal paradoxes, creating loops that trap ships and crews. We sealed it from the inside, but the seal is failing. You need to collapse the wound completely before it breaks free." "How do we do that?" Lieutenant Webb asked. "The ice," I found myself saying, my consciousness joining with Dr. Foster's to strengthen the transmission. "The Arctic ice itself is part of the anomaly's structure. It uses the crystalline matrix of frozen water to propagate through time. You need to superheat the area, melt the ice down to the bedrock beneath. The thermal shock will destabilize the quantum field holding the anomaly in place. That would require a massive amount of energy, Webb replied. We are just a research vessel. We do not have that capability. Captain Morrison's voice joined ours. Then call for help. Contact the military. Tell them you have a Code Omega situation. They will know what that means. They will send the equipment you need. Another pause, longer this time. I could feel the anomaly stirring, sensing the conversation, understanding that we were trying to organize its destruction. It began to push harder against the seal, trying to break free before the Polar Star crew could act. We pushed back, all four of us pooling our strength to hold the barrier in place, but I could feel it weakening. Cracks were forming. Light was bleeding through. The anomaly was winning. Lieutenant Webb, I shouted through the transmission, you need to act now. We cannot hold it much longer. If it breaks free, it will consume your ship just like it consumed ours. You will be trapped in the loop forever. Understood, Webb replied, his voice suddenly firm with resolve. We are calling for assistance. Hold on, just hold on a little longer. A little longer. It sounded so simple, but every second was an agony of effort, of will grinding against hunger, of order struggling against chaos. The seal was failing. I could feel my consciousness beginning to fragment, pieces of myself breaking off and dissolving into the void. Jenkins was fading too. His presence, once so solid and steady, was becoming translucent, barely there. I am sorry, he whispered. I cannot hold on much longer. Tell my daughter I love her. Tell her I did this for her. She will never know you existed, Captain Morrison reminded him gently. We erased ourselves, remember. Then tell her anyway, Jenkins insisted. Someone, somewhere, in some timeline where I still exist, tell her. I will, I promised, though I knew it was a lie. There was no timeline where Jenkins still existed. We had sacrificed that possibility when we became the seal. Dr. Foster's presence flared one last time. I am detecting thermal signatures, she announced. Multiple ships approaching at high speed, military vessels. They are carrying the equipment we need. Hope surged through the seal, giving us renewed strength. We could hold on a little longer, just a little longer. The anomaly sensed what was coming. It began to thrash violently against our barrier, no longer probing for weakness but simply hammering against us with raw force. The seal cracked. Light poured through. I felt part of myself torn away, consumed by the hunger on the other side. Now, Captain Morrison screamed, they need to do it now. Through our connection to the radio transmission, we heard Lieutenant Webb giving orders. All ships commence thermal bombardment. Target the ice shelf at the specified coordinates. Full power. Fire at will. The world exploded into heat and light. I felt the ice below us vaporizing, turning instantly from solid to gas as thousands of megawatts of energy poured into the anomaly zone. The quantum field that held the wound in spacetime began to collapse, unable to maintain coherence in the face of such massive thermal disruption. The anomaly screamed. It was the sound of reality itself being torn apart, then stitched back together. It was the sound of timelines collapsing, of paradoxes resolving, of loops breaking and shattering into fragments that could never be reassembled. And we screamed with it, because we were part of the seal, and the seal was part of the anomaly, and everything was connected in ways that defied description. As the wound closed, we felt ourselves being pulled apart, our consciousnesses scattered across the collapsing dimensions. But it was working. The anomaly was dying. The wound was sealing, not just with our sacrifice but with the fundamental force of thermodynamics, with entropy itself rushing in to fill the impossible space where the anomaly had existed. In my final moments of awareness, I saw something beautiful. I saw the northern passage as it had been on our first day at sea. I saw Captain Wendell at the helm, his face creased with a smile as he guided us through the ice. I saw Patricia and Reynolds working together, laughing at some joke I could not hear. I saw Dr. Foster in her laboratory, her eyes bright with the joy of discovery. I saw Jenkins in the engine room, calling his daughter on the satellite phone, telling her he would be home soon. And I saw myself in the communications room, young and whole and full of hope for the adventure ahead. That version of me had no idea what was coming. He had no idea that he would soon hear his own voice screaming for help across the void of time. He had no idea that he would sacrifice everything to save people he had never met, in timelines he would never see. But he would make that choice anyway. I knew he would, because it was the right thing to do, because some things are worth more than existence, because love and hope and the desire to protect others can transcend even death itself. The seal shattered completely. The anomaly collapsed inward, imploding into a singularity of impossible density before winking out of existence entirely. And we, the four guardians who had held it at bay, dissolved with it. I felt my consciousness scattering like light through a prism, splitting into countless fragments that scattered across time and space. Each fragment contained a memory, a moment, a piece of who I had been. Some landed in the past, whispering warnings that would never be heard. Some landed in the future, creating echoes of possibility. And some simply vanished into the void, lost forever in the spaces between moments. But one fragment, the largest piece, the core of who I was, landed somewhere unexpected. I opened my eyes. I was lying on my back, staring up at a gray sky. Snow was falling gently, landing on my face in cold pinpricks. I could feel the ice beneath me, solid and real. I could feel my body, whole and intact. I could feel my heartbeat, strong and steady in my chest. I sat up slowly, confused and disoriented. I was on the ice, that much was clear. But where, when, how? "Easy there," a voice said. I turned to see Lieutenant Webb kneeling beside me, his face creased with concern. "You have been unconscious for several minutes. We pulled you from the water after the ice collapsed." "The water," I repeated, my voice hoarse. "Your ship went down," Webb explained. "The Northern Passage. We received your distress call and got here as fast as we could. You are the only survivor. I am sorry." I looked around and saw the wreckage. Pieces of the Northern Passage floating in the dark water where the ice had melted. Emergency rafts, debris, bodies. No, not bodies. Those were the others. Jenkins, Dr. Foster, Captain Morrison. They had not survived the collapse. They had given everything to seal the anomaly and they had not come back. But I had. Somehow, impossibly, I had been ejected from the seal before it shattered completely. I had been given a second chance at existence. "What is your name?" Webb asked gently. "Rook," I said automatically. "My name is Rook. I am 29 years old. I am a communications technician with the United States Polar Research Division." Webb helped me to my feet and guided me toward his ship. As we walked, I looked back at the place where the anomaly had been. The ice was smooth and unbroken now, as if nothing had ever happened. The wound was sealed. The threat was ended. The timelines were safe. But the price had been terrible. Over the following weeks, as I recovered in a hospital in Anchorage, I learned what had happened. The official story was that the Northern Passage had encountered an unexpected ice shelf collapse. The ship had gone down quickly, and I was the only survivor. 11 crew members had been lost. There was no mention of temporal anomalies, no mention of duplicate ships, no mention of the loop that had consumed so many lives across so many timelines. The truth had been classified, buried under layers of bureaucracy and national security concerns. But I knew the truth. I remembered everything, every iteration of the loop, every version of myself, every choice that led to the seal. And I carried that knowledge like a weight in my chest, a burden I could never share with anyone. I attended the memorial service for my crewmates. I stood beside their families and listened to the eulogies. I watched Jenkins' daughter cry for a father she would never see again. I saw Dr. Foster's colleagues speak about her brilliant mind and her dedication to science. I heard Captain Wendell's wife describe a man who loved the sea more than anything except his family. And I said nothing. What could I say? That they had died heroes, that they had saved countless lives by preventing future crews from falling into the anomaly, that their sacrifice had meaning and purpose. I could not say any of that without revealing the truth. So I stayed silent and let them believe what the official story told them, that their loved ones had died in a tragic accident, a random act of nature, meaningless and preventable. It was almost unbearable. But then, 3 months after the incident, I received a package in the mail. Inside was Dr. Foster's notebook, the one she had been keeping throughout the ordeal. A note attached explained that it had been found in my personal effects recovered from the wreckage. The salvage team had assumed it was mine and returned it. I opened the notebook with trembling hands and read through the pages. Dr. Foster's handwriting filled every page with observations, calculations, theories about the nature of temporal anomalies. And on the very last page, written in a different hand, was a message clearly meant for me. Rook, if you are reading this, then you survived. You were ejected from the seal before it collapsed. I knew it would happen. I planned for it. Someone needs to remember what happened here. Someone needs to carry the story forward to make sure that future generations know what we sacrificed and why. That someone is you. Do not waste this gift. Do not let our sacrifice be forgotten. Tell the story. Make people understand that time is fragile, that reality is precious, that every moment matters because it might be the only one we get. Tell them, and live. Live for all of us who could not. Live well, Rook. You earned it. I closed the notebook and pressed it to my chest, tears streaming down my face. Dr. Foster had known. Even at the end, even as we were becoming part of the seal, she had been thinking ahead, planning for my survival, ensuring that the truth would not be lost. So I am telling you now. I am sharing this story, even though most people will think it is fiction, even though the government would prefer it stayed buried, even though it means reliving the worst experience of my life every time I speak the words. I am telling you because you deserve to know. Because the next time you hear about a ship that disappeared in the Arctic, or a crew that vanished without a trace, or a strange anomaly detected in the ice, you will remember this story. You will remember that time is not as solid as we think. That reality can break. That loops can form and trap people in cycles of suffering. And maybe, just maybe, you will be more careful. You will appreciate the moments you have. You will make different choices. You will avoid the traps that consumed us. I am 32 years old now, 3 years older than I was when I first heard my own voice screaming for help through the radio. I work as a consultant for the Polar Research Division, advising on safety protocols and risk assessment. I help design better communication systems, better emergency procedures, better ways to detect anomalies before they become deadly. And every night before I go to sleep, I think about the others. Jenkins, who wanted his daughter to know he loved her. Dr. Foster, who gave me this final gift of survival. Captain Morrison, who waited 3 years for a chance to end the cycle. And all the versions of ourselves, scattered across broken timelines, who suffered and died so that we could seal the wound. They are gone now, erased from existence, but they are not forgotten. They live on in this story, in these words, in the memory of what they did and why they did it. And if you have read this far, if you have followed my journey through the impossible and the terrifying, then they live on in you too. You carry their story now. You know the truth. And that knowledge, however small, however insignificant it might seem, matters. It matters because truth always matters. Because memory always matters. Because the people we lose deserve to be remembered, even if the universe itself has forgotten them. So please, if this story resonated with you, share it. Tell others. Let the world know what happened on the Northern Passage in the winter of 2022. Let them know that time is fragile and reality is precious. Let them know that some sacrifices are so complete that they erase the very people who made them. Let them know that heroes do not always get to see the world they saved. But they are heroes nonetheless. I still live in Anchorage. Sometimes on clear nights, I drive out to the coast and look north toward the Arctic waters. I think about the seal we created, about the barrier holding the anomaly in check. Is it still there? Is it still holding? Or has it finally failed, releasing the horror we fought so hard to contain? I do not know. I have no way of knowing. The monitoring equipment we installed in the area shows nothing unusual. The ice is stable. Ships pass through without incident. Life goes on as if nothing ever happened. But I know better. I know that beneath the surface, in the spaces between moments, in the quantum foam where reality dissolves into probability, the wound might still exist, dormant, waiting, hungry for another chance to feed. And if that day comes, if the seal finally fails and the anomaly breaks free again, I will be ready. I will return to those waters. I will face it again, armed with the knowledge we gained, the experience we earned through suffering and sacrifice. Because that is what survivors do. That is what witnesses do. We carry the burden of memory and we use it to protect those who come after us. We remember, we warn, we fight. And we never, ever give up. The Arctic winter is coming again. Soon, new research vessels will head north into those cold waters, crewed by people who have no idea what dangers might be waiting for them. They will trust in their equipment, in their training, in their understanding of the natural world. And they will be wrong, because the Arctic holds secrets that science cannot explain. It holds wounds that logic cannot heal. It holds hungers that reason cannot satisfy. But it also holds the memory of 4 people who gave everything to protect others. It holds the echo of a sacrifice so complete that it erased the sacrificers from existence. It holds the truth of what can happen when time breaks down and reality starts to eat itself. And now you hold that truth too. What you do with it is up to you. For myself, I will continue to watch. I will continue to warn. I will continue to remember Jenkins and Dr. Foster and Captain Morrison and all the versions of ourselves who suffered in the loop. I will remember that at 2:47 a.m. on a cold November night, I heard my own voice screaming for help across the void of time. And I will make sure that scream was not in vain. Because we broke the loop, we sealed the wound, we saved countless lives that would have been consumed if we had failed. And that, in the end, is all that matters. We saved them, even if they never know it, even if history never records it, even if the universe itself has forgotten. We saved them. And we would do it again. Every single time. Thank you for following Rook's journey through this horrifying ordeal. The sacrifice of the Northern Passage crew will never be officially recognized, but their story lives on in the memories of those who hear it. The Arctic holds many secrets, and some of them are best left undisturbed. But when brave souls venture into those frozen waters, they can take comfort knowing that others came before them, faced the impossible, and prevailed. If this story moved you, if it made you think about the fragility of time and the preciousness of every moment, then the crew of the Northern Passage did not sacrifice themselves in vain. Their story has found you, and through you, it will continue to spread. Stay safe, stay vigilant, and remember, not all distress calls come from the present. Some come from futures that have not happened yet or pasts that have been erased. Listen carefully, and you might just hear them calling across the void.